In 1982, a simple basketball shoe was released with a promise that seemed like science fiction. It was the first shoe to put air under a player's feet. Nobody knew then that this chunky leather silhouette would transcend the hardwood of the NBA to become the most successful sneaker in human history, generating billions of dollars and defining global street culture for over 4 decades. This is the story of how a functional athletic tool became a symbol of power, status, and the streets. Welcome to Zero to Billion, where we deconstruct the empires built on nothing but a vision. The Nike Air Force One was never supposed to be a fashion icon. Designed by Bruce Kilgore, the shoe was inspired by a hiking boot, built for stability and ruggedness on the court. When Nike launched it, they signed 6 NBA stars, known as the Original Six, to promote the high-top version. It was a hit among athletes, but in the fast-moving world of 80s footwear, Nike planned to discontinue the model just 2 years later in 1984 to make room for the next big thing. In any other era, the Air Force One would have been a forgotten relic of sports history, a vintage footnote in a catalog of thousands. However, a strange phenomenon began to occur in the inner cities of the American East Coast, specifically in Baltimore. While Nike was ready to kill the project, local retailers noticed that the demand for the Air Force One wasn't dying, it was exploding. Three store owners, later known as the Three Amigos, flew to Nike's headquarters in Oregon with a desperate plea. They didn't want the new models, they wanted more Air Force Ones. They proposed a radical idea called the Color of the Month Club. If Nike produced exclusive colors for their stores, they would guarantee the sales. This was the birth of the drop culture we see today, turning a basketball shoe into a regional obsession. As the late 80s rolled into the early 90s, the craze moved from the courts to the concrete of New York City, specifically Harlem. The shoe earned the nickname Uptowns because if you saw someone wearing a pair of pristine, all-white Air Force Ones, you knew exactly where they came from. It became a status symbol. In the streets, your level of success was measured by how clean your sneakers were. Wearing a scuffed pair was a sign of struggle. Wearing a fresh, cocaine-white pair meant you were making money. The shoe became the unofficial uniform of the hustler, a silent language of luxury and influence. The turning point that took the Air Force One from a regional favorite to a global powerhouse was the rise of hip-hop. Rappers didn't just wear the shoe, they worshipped it. When Jay-Z, Rockefeller Records, and Nelly began featuring the sneaker in their lyrics and music videos, the demand went vertical. Nelly's 2002 hit song, dedicated entirely to the shoe, served as a multi-million-dollar commercial that played on every radio station in the world. Suddenly, kids in London, Tokyo, and Berlin wanted the same leather shoes they saw on the superstars of MTV. Nike realized they weren't just selling a sneaker, they were selling a piece of the American dream. By the mid-2000s, Nike leaned into the psychology of scarcity. They began collaborating with artists, streetwear brands, and luxury fashion houses. The Air Force One became a canvas for expression. From the ultra-limited Entourage editions to the Virgil Abloh, Off-White, reimagining, the shoe bridged the gap between the gutter and the gallery. It is one of the few items on Earth that is worn by both the billionaire in the private jet and the teenager in the housing project. It is democratic yet exclusive, simple yet deeply complex in its cultural significance. Today, the Air Force One sells millions of pairs every single year, contributing significantly to Nike's multi-billion-dollar valuation. It survived the death of disco, the rise of the internet, and the ever-changing cycles of fashion. It succeeded because it tapped into the human desire for identity and the psychological need for status. It proved that a product doesn't just need to be functional, it needs to tell a story that people want to be a part of. The journey from a discontinued basketball shoe to a global icon is a masterclass in brand longevity and grassroots marketing. As we look at the legacy of the Air Force One, we see the blueprint of how a brand moves from zero to billion. It requires listening to the streets, embracing the culture that adopts you, and never being afraid to let your product evolve. If you want to understand the intersection of business, psychology, and power, look no further than the white leather on your feet. For more deep dives into the empires that rule our world, subscribe to Zero to Billion. The journey to the top starts with a single step, and we are here to show you the way.